Hi everyone and welcome back to the channel. I'm Kirsty and this is Stuck in the Mud. So today I'm going to be talking all about health OCD and health anxiety because this is something that has affected me personally, and it's something I've probably put off making a video about because I think, if I'm really honest, to this day it probably still affects me to a small degree, but I definitely have it under more control than I used to, because it did at one point actually affect my ability to function normally on a day-to-day basis. So this is a really personal video for me, and I hope this video may be relatable to some of you out there, and I really sympathise for anyone going through health anxiety because it is really distressing and it's really scary. You know, when you have health anxiety, it doesn't leave you. It's there 24/7. You feel it all the time. And in my worst days with this, it was just the panic and the overwhelm. Day to day it was just awful. How any other way could I describe it? It was really distressing, and it really was debilitating. It really was. It just completely brought me to my knees. But I also want to talk about the differences between health OCD and health anxiety, because they are actually different things. But you may have one, you may have the other, you may have both. And I think with me personally, in my experience, it's something that's always been there to a small degree, and it didn't overtake my life, but it's always been there. There's always been an obsessive element about my health and the health of my loved ones and my family. And I think maybe my experience, my direct experience, maybe enhanced that and actually brought out health anxiety within me because of my personal experiences in the world. And I want to kind of delve into that as well and discuss that with you. So let's get started and talk about my personal experience with this. So I've just mentioned it briefly there that I've always had, I think, health anxiety or a slight obsession with my health since being a young child. So it's something that's always been there. And I talked about my past with obsessive compulsive disorder, and I think for me it's always been more of an obsession that one day something bad could happen, and to myself or my family, my loved ones, and I've always been obsessive and doing rituals around preventing that happening. But then that went on for quite a few years. I think it was always present. I think, like I say, it didn't overtake my life. It didn't bring me to a place where I was unable to control it, because my OCD would move around to different subtypes. So that might have been hyper-responsibility or scrupulosity or POCD. That's the big one that really brought me to my knees, and it really affected my ability to function. So some subtypes of OCD have affected my ability to function, especially when they're around harm of others, because it's very personal to me. It upsets me because that's so far apart from who I am. And the thing with the health side of OCD growing up, it's you, it's your life, it's what you value the most, your life. And I've always been very aware of the fragility of life from being such a small child. That may be due to maybe some experiences I had, or, you know, I'm very sensitive to what's in the media. So I've always been very aware of what's going on in the world, and I take it quite, not personally, but I'm very sensitive to it. It's just very, you know, and I have a lot of empathy. I think that's what I'm trying to say. I have a lot of empathy for others. So when I hear of something heartbreaking going on in the media, and even from being a young child, I'd take it on. You know, I'd be so empathetic to others, and I think that's why OCD affects a lot of sensitive people, because we take a lot on. We take a lot on, and we have a lot of empathy for others. So, but yeah, with the health side of things, I think maybe as I got older, it crossed over into health anxiety. And the difference between health OCD and health anxiety, to put it in a simple form, is that health anxiety, people often fear of having a debilitating, life-threatening medical condition or disease, and they have it, they think they have it. But whereas health OCD, it is in terms of fear of getting it in the future or something bad happening in the future, either a life-threatening medical condition or getting a disease of some kind. And growing up, my health obsessions were around HIV and AIDS, stepping on needles. If I saw blood, I'd be panicked that it would be infected. So that was always there. And the HIV and AIDS thing, it carried on for quite a few years. It was always there in the background, but I'd be able to control it. I don't want to say control. I hate saying control about these things because we shouldn't control our thoughts. We should just let them be there. So I don't want to say control. So if I say that, I don't mean that at all. When I say control, I don't mean actually control. I just mean it didn't affect my life to the degree where I was unable to function. So when I had a lot of these thoughts about being infected with HIV, AIDS, or accidentally from stepping on a needle, or someone actually putting a needle in me that was infected, me touching contaminated blood, it was there for quite a few years, like I say, but it didn't really affect my ability to function. It definitely affected my life, but it didn't really get me to the place where I was just in a really bad way. And that was until I had children. And I think the difference there was being that I have these lives to look after now. I have these children, and the thought of something like that taking that away from me was just too much to bear. And that's where it just destroyed me, and I think that's quite common along new mothers, and we can become quite obsessive about it, about the fact that of leaving them, and it's heartbreaking for anyone to even think of that. But I think when you've got OCD and you think like that, it can become quite obsessive, and we can then start doing rituals and rumination to try and figure that out and try and prevent something like that from happening, and it can become really debilitating. So after I had children, it would always usually focus on infected blood and maybe catching a deadly disease, and it really, that's where it stayed for a number of years. And I wonder where that focus came from. I think it's discussed a lot in the media now, isn't it? And I think maybe when I was younger, they talked a lot about it. I think it was definitely we were more aware of it then, especially in the 80s and 90s. It was obviously a big thing, and I think we heard so much more, and we hear so much more now about preventing it and stopping the spread of diseases like that. But it's a sexually transmitted disease, and it wasn't something that part didn't I wasn't obsessed about that, because I was in a relationship, and I'll be honest, I've only been in one serious relationship, and so that didn't really affect me, the sexually transmitted element of it. It was the irrational fear of stepping on a needle or touching contaminated blood, and it really revolved around that for so long, and then that faded away when I became, I could see how irrational it was after some time. And I think from doing my therapy, that helped. I was doing metacognitive therapy, where I was letting the thoughts be there. And, I could feel the fear, I could feel the anxiety, but I had to let those thoughts and feelings be there. And they did quieten down. I really stuck to that therapy for a long time, and it's helped me out of some really dark and sad places where I was in my life. You know, I was really sad, depressed and anxious all the time, and I wasn't living my life fully. You know, I was just surviving. You know, it just felt like I was surviving day to day. But then I've had some really good times as well. You know, it's not that it was like that for years and years. I've got 5 children, by the way, if you don't know already. So I've had a number of children, and they're very important to me. So it's very understandable to know that, you know, I value my life. I value my children's lives, you know, and I want us all to be healthy, as anyone would. But I think when you have OCD, you become very fixated on it and obsessive, and, you know, it can become a problem. It become a big problem. But I did get out of that. The only time the health side of things cropped up again for me was when my mum was diagnosed with breast cancer, and it became very focused on losing my mum. That's when it really kind of started again for me. So when she was diagnosed with breast cancer, it was a really tough time, a difficult time, because I really felt my mum's life was at risk, and, you know, it was affecting us as a family, and it was a really difficult time, you know. And my mum was being so brave for the whole family, and, you know, she was amazing, but obviously she was going through a really tough time too. And the way it did start up again then, because it really felt like, wow, you know, this is affecting us. This is, you know, you hear other people, but now it's affecting our family. And, you know, thankfully my mum did get better. And then a few years later, she did actually get it again. You know, but I saw her go through obviously all the treatments, and that was really hard to see as a child. And I was about 21 years old, I think, at the time when all this happened. And, you know, it's a lot. I mean, I was still fairly young, and it's a difficult thing to watch your parent go through something like that. And my mum beat it twice, you know, and she was amazing. And then my dad became ill with it then, different kind. You know, he had prostate cancer, and then a few years later had melanoma. So it, you know, there was different things happening. There's a lot of things happening in my family, and it became a big thing. You know, it's not something you're reading in the paper. It was happening to my family, and I think it did kind of start again where I was kind of having obsessive thoughts, but because I was a lot younger at the time, it didn't explode and get to a place where it was really affecting my ability to function. But I think it did affect me, even though my obsessions surrounding other things like HIV/AIDS, you know, I think it was always there. It was always the fear of loss. And definitely it was the fear of something terrible happening to someone in my family, myself, or as anyone in my family. And it became quite obsessive for some time, where I was having different rituals that I do to prevent something, me thinking that I was preventing something bad from happening. And thankfully my mum, you know, she had it twice, and she went on for 20 years doing great. And then my dad, still here today, he's almost 90 years old, my dad. And unfortunately, you may have known from some of my other videos that we lost my mum last year, and that was because it went into bone cancer, and that's where we lost her. So that was a very, very difficult time. And I was also pregnant at the time when I knew that she was terminally ill. So I think after having a child, then having a baby, I was also dealing with the fact that we were losing my mum, and she was very, very ill. But also I was in that hormonal stage after having a baby, and I think, you know, obviously my experience in the world at the time, and also the fact that I was bringing another life into the world, and it became, you know, we were also during COVID times. There was a lot going on, I'll be honest, there was a lot going on. But the fragility of life again, it came back, and I was very obsessed about the fact that of becoming ill, and I also suffered a lot of physical symptoms after having my fifth daughter. She's my fifth child, my fourth daughter. But yeah, I became very obsessed about my health and the fact that I'd had a C-section, and if I could get like a blood clot afterwards, I was very, very anxious about my health, very panicky about it. And then I did actually get physically ill. I got, I ended up in hospital with severe infection that had started out to be sepsis. You know, it got into my bloodstream. So it was a water infection that actually spread really fast, and you know, it was had a really, really bad infection, and I ended up on IV antibiotics in hospital, and I was very, very ill at the time. But then I was having a lot of physical symptoms of anxiety at the time. I can look back on it now and realise that was anxiety. I was very, I felt so detached from myself. It was just an awful time. I had a lot of dizziness. I felt unbalanced. I talked about this in another video where I felt like I had a lot of headaches. My eyesight went really strange. You know, there was a lot of physical symptoms, and I can really relate that back to anxiety and maybe a change in myself, because let's be honest, I was almost 42 when I had my daughter, my last child. So there's a lot of hormonal changes there as well. But I definitely have read up on and I definitely researched a lot more into physical symptoms of anxiety, and the whole thing about, you know, the unbalanced and dizziness is, you know, a lot of women are talking about this after having babies, and a lot of them are very preoccupied with their health. And, you know, I could really see the similarities there, and that is a thing. So health anxiety after a baby is not, you know, it's not uncommon. You know, people do, because they've obviously got this life now, and some people can brush it off a lot more easily. But then if you've probably had other mental health conditions in the past, like I say, I became quite obsessive about it afterwards, and it was a very, very difficult time. And I think obviously I was going through something quite personal to me with my mum as well. And it really did bring me to my knees after my last child. Like I say, I've done a video more in depth about this, which you can watch on my channel, and I talk a lot more about this there. But really in this video, I wanted to give my own experience of health, OCD and anxiety, and talk about it a bit more, because I think it is talked about more now. You know, people are very dismissive about health anxiety, and people being obsessive about their health is like you're a hypochondriac. But it's a lot more than that. It's debilitating. It's scary. It's the most frightening thing, you know, that, you know, I've experienced probably up to this point. It really did shake me to my core, because like I say, I was having a lot of physical symptoms as well. And I think looking back, and this is my own judgment on that time, that I felt like my nervous system was completely overwhelmed, and I really had to do a lot of work to get back to a state of calm, because it was a frightening time, because I didn't know what was going on with me physically. I was, you know, I started to become, like I say, when I say it crossed over from health OCD to health anxiety, because I started to think there was something wrong with me. I ended up at hospital a few times. I had ambulances out. I had various different things happening. It was all very strange, and I do want to talk about this more in a future video where I talk about disassociation, because that was a really frightening thing to go through. I felt like I was so detached from everything going on around me, and that's frightening. But yeah, just giving an overview of my experiences with this, it's it's debilitating, and it doesn't leave you because, like I say, you've got your body and you're with it every day. You're here. It doesn't leave you. And when you're faced with those kind of excessive worries and excessive anxiety about these things, it's awful. It's just truly one of the most horrendous things I have gone through, and people don't understand that. If you've not been through it, you don't understand how it just overtakes your life. And like I say, it is something to a degree that's still there. Obviously, I've lost my mum in the last year, and that's been a big thing for me to go through. But I definitely feel now that it hasn't overtaken my life now to the point it did back then. Now I accept those thoughts are there. I use my metacognitive therapy. And it's difficult because we're faced with these intrusions every day in the media. They're very worst case scenario focused on everything, especially to do with health. And we are constantly bombarded with this kind of information. We're drowning in this information. Like I say, you go on various social medias, there's always someone that may be discussing their experiences with life-threatening medical conditions or diseases. We're often, we're exposed to these things daily, and it's very difficult. I know in America, you watch the commercials on TV over there, and they're very they'll run off a list of all the things that could go wrong with this medication that you potentially take, and all the things that worst case scenario, things that could potentially go wrong. And it's a lot to take on. We're all faced with this information, and you have to kind of let that be there. I was reading something the other day about someone else's experience, and they were reporting on it in the paper of something that was happening. We're always fed all this information, and I had to let that be there, as I always do with detached mindfulness. And it does work. If I consistently practice my detached mindfulness and metacognitive therapy, it has definitely helped me. So I personally champion metacognitive therapy because it has definitely helped me with my OCD and anxiety at some of the worst times. And I've had to come to some acceptance of these thoughts as well, and these intrusive thoughts about my health, because, it's very hard to stay present when we're often faced with all these heartbreaking things happening in the world and happening to other people. But we have to accept that we can't find certainty about what the future holds. And that is really hard when you have OCD and anxiety, because you want to be certain about what could happen in the future. And I can't be. And, things might happen, things might not happen, but I have to accept that. And when I've really come to some level of acceptance with that, I can't change that. But what I can change is my response and my behaviour around these thoughts, and all the things I see in the media and on social media. I can change my response to that. I'll always be the sensitive, empathetic person that I am, and that's not going to change. And that's a good thing. It's good to be like that. But what I do know now is how I let these thoughts just be there. And when I read something upsetting in the paper or online, if I in the newspapers or anything like that, if I read something upsetting, I will let it be there, and as uncomfortable as it feels, I have to do that, because that's the only way it's going to go. If I try and work it out and try and get too involved with it, it's just feeding the cycle of OCD and anxiety, and it's just going to be that whole going down the rabbit hole and getting into the cycle, and it just snowballs. If I was to describe it as a snowball, it would just snowball and get bigger and bigger and bigger. Whereas if I can just let it be there and let it do what it wants without my involvement, or as the least involvement as possible, it disappears. It gets smaller and smaller, and I can still move forward with my day, doing all the things I want to do that day. And that's been immense. It's been a massive thing and a massive help to me to get my life back on track and working towards my goals and values, because we deserve to still live that fulfilling life. You know, if it's just, you know, it's going to come in, I'll have intrusive thoughts most days about things like this, you know, because like I say, we're faced with it daily, especially around health concerns. But I have to let them be there, and the more I get involved with them, the bigger they get. So I have to let them do what they want and carry on with my day, because otherwise, it'll just get bigger. And you don't deserve that. If you're going through this right now, you know, we can't predict the future. We can't, you know, and we just have to do the best we can and make sensible choices. And especially in regards to our health, because I think I can become quite obsessive about things, about my health. But we can do the best we can with what we know, make healthy choices and all that, and continue to live our lives fully to the best we can, and let those negative, intrusive thoughts be there, but move forward the best way you know and the best way you can, because it's hard. It's really hard going through something like this. And if you're going through this at the moment, I've got so much empathy and sympathy for what you're going through, because I know it isn't easy. And I know it isn't easy when it's something as big as your life that you have anxiety about, and you know it's the most important thing. You value your life, and we do. I think people that are going through anxiety and OCD about their health, you know, we value our lives so much, and you know it's a really tough thing to kind of have anxiety over, because it's the most important thing, and we can do the best we can with that, and not try and think too much about the future, as hard as that is, and just let those intrusions be there, and you'll get there, believe me. You know, I've been in a really difficult place since my daughter was born, and that's almost 3 years ago, but I've been doing a lot better the last, I'd say, year and a half. So a good 18 months after I had her, I was in a very difficult place, but the last 18 months have been a lot better. I wouldn't be here talking about it, believe me, if you could see me back then. There's no way I could have done this. But like I say, it's took a bit of courage to come and talk about this today, but I hope it's been helpful. And if you relate to any of this, let me know in the comments, and we'll get there together. We can do this, and we can definitely still live those fulfilling lives that we deserve to. So thanks for watching. Please remember to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel, because it helps a lot. And I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching, guys.